everybody, and welcome back for another video. In today's video, I am talking about the new movie Flight Risk. This is the movie directed by Mel Gibson that stars Mark Wahlberg, Topher Grace, and Michelle Dockery. And basically, what this movie is like when we see from the trailer, it's these people. There's a witness being transported from one place to another. And what we find out is that the pilot is a bit more than what the two of them signed up for, right? We find out that Mark Wahlberg is actually the villain in this movie. And so it's a really, really crazy, wild ride, mostly actually in the plane, to be perfectly honest. But I'm going to give you my opinions of the movie first with no spoilers, and then I'll give it a rating, and then I'll probably talk about the movie only a little bit because it's kind of one of your cookie cutter movies, in my opinion, but it is a good movie. So, uh, non-spoiler stuff, I thought it was a good movie. I thought it was really cool to see Mark Wahlberg as a villain as opposed to the hero all the time. I also I had forgotten that Topher Grace was in this movie, and once I saw what his character was, which was basically a smart mouth, it made total sense why Topher Grace was, cast here because he played such a great character with Eric Foreman back during the 90s slash early 2000s with that 70s show. So great casting here. Michelle Dockery did a great job as well, playing basically the person that was in charge of watching over Topher Grace's character Winston while he's being transported from one place to another. Let's see. I thought it was cool. I thought it was kind of interesting that the majority, like literally the majority, I'd say 95 to 98% of this movie is all filmed within the plane. Probably a decent way to keep the budget down for sure. Um, but there's also, as far as like filming, I couldn't tell if it was just bad CGI or if it was, you know, film made from AI. I'm not too sure, but there's a couple of instances. One, the opening shot where it kind of it starts off by looking at the sky and then it pans down and then it's right in front of a motel, so to speak. And that shot looked really weird to me. It did not look like a live set by any means. And so that kind of is what the first impression was. And then what we find out, and this is again not a spoiler, that Topher Grace's character is basically hiding out in this motel and he hears a noise and he opens the window and it's some some animals. I think it's a moose, maybe. And the animals looked really bad as far as like CGI, or again, maybe it was AI. I do not know. It was something along those lines. It was either decent AI or really bad CGI. So that in the beginning of the movie kind of set a bad tone, in my opinion. But I will say, as long as you stay with it for a little bit longer and get past this, um, the movie will be just fine, in my opinion. Another thing that I thought was kind of a miss in a way was that some of the comedy was a little misplaced, in my opinion. So, for instance, we know what happens from the trailers that, they get up in the air, Mark Wahlberg turns into the bad guy, they have some scuffling back and forth, and, eventually they got to land this plane and get away from Mark Wahlberg's character named Daryl. And so when they're contacting these people, they're like, we need to get to the ground. We need some help. And these people that are supposedly, supposed to, be legitimate people that are trying to help them are trying to crack a lot of jokes along the way. And I thought those were kind of off. It was even to the point where the people over the intercom were like hitting on the girl a little bit. And it just, I don't know. It wasn't my favorite thing necessarily to see during that moment. I didn't like if I felt like if I was in their shoes and I was supposed to land this plane, I have no idea what I'm doing. That is not what I want to hear, right? So I just thought that was interesting. Um, Another thing that's interesting, and then this is actually not part of the the movie itself. Well, I didn't know this while watching, and I also didn't pick up on it when I was listening to the different parts because there's the three main people in the plane, but then there's also the people over the intercom. One of the people I didn't know that was in this was Leah Remini. That was really cool. Part of me wants to rewatch it just knowing that she is part of it, and I didn't pick up on that. Something I think is weird after looking at IMDb is the guy that is trying to help them land the plane, supposedly the voice of that character and the actual character that we see later on in the movie is not the same person. That's really weird, in my opinion. I don't quite understand why that played out the way it did, but it is what it is. Maybe that's why when we see this character that was over the line at the end of the movie, um, why they didn't talk. They were just kind of like, they were like grunting a little, almost like they were grunting or just making very, very odd noises. I don't know. So, my opinion, there's some weird, awkward things in this movie that I think probably could have been cleaned up a little bit. But at the same time, it was really cool to see Mark Wahlberg in this type of role. It was really cool to see Topher Grace on the film again, and just seeing him do his thing. And I didn't recognize Michelle Dockery, but she did a really good job too. So, if I were to give this movie a rating, I'd probably give it probably a solid. I'm probably gonna have to go with a solid six. I feel like I'm trying, like when I was thinking about my ratings, I was thinking, can I give this movie an eight? And I was like, no, can't do that. Can I give this movie a seven? Maybe. I don't think it's a below average film, but I think it might be just slightly above average. So I'm gonna say a good 6 out of 10. Really solid. It is worth watching. I would say maybe wait till streaming if you can wait that long. Just because I don't think it's a movie you have to run out and see in theaters per se, but it's a decent watch if it's on streaming. So uh, let's talk about some spoilers. So, the premise of this movie is that Topher Grace's character Winston has been, in hiding, doing some shisty stuff, and the movie opens right away with him being caught and, imprisoned, so we can get this movie rolling with the flight. So he gets taken from his motel, and then we see him get put into an airplane. Madeline, which is Michelle Dockery's character, is supposed to watch over Winston while they, go from one place to another. And then Mark Wahlberg's character, Daryl, hops in the plane, and then they're off to, where they're supposed to be taking Winston. Winston's character, he keeps saying like he's I'm a witness. It's because his testimony is key for another um, ruling that's going on. So, and he's part of it. So that's kind of why he's seen as a bad guy, but he's saying, I'm just the one that moved numbers around. Like, I didn't kill anybody. I didn't do this, this, or that. He's just purely the numbers guy that moved things around in accounts. But what we find out is that, after some small talk, eventually we get some turbulence and it shifts some papers to roll around. And Winston sees that there is uh, the pilot's profile, like a paper that identifies who he is and his certifications and stuff. Maybe it's his pilot license. I don't know what it officially was. But Winston could see that this was not who their pilot was. And so that was a red flag to him. He tries to get Madeline's attention, but Madeline wants nothing to do with him. She's like really annoyed with him the whole first beginning of this movie. So Winston even tries to like bite off of a button from his shirt and spits it at her to try to get her attention. But because Daryl is, alerted as well, Winston can't really do much about it. The movie progresses. And Daryl kind of slips that he knows that he says, "Oh, you're going to Seattle." And according to Madeline, he was never really briefed about that. I didn't quite understand what was going on with this conversation because it's like if he's your pilot, he should know where he's taking you, right? So it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me what was going on with that. But she was basically piecing together that he knew too much information without being deliberately told what's going on. And what this unfolds is that Daryl actually killed the actual pilot, very brutally. They describe how it was done later on because someone, you know, later on we find out that there was the pilot was found and like his teeth were all ripped out, his eyes were gouged out, and it was just like really bad. It's kind of like Mark Wahlberg's character, and he even talks about this later. Mark Wahlberg's character is very much into like brutality with his kills. We don't really ever see them on screen, but they sure talk about it. Because even throughout this movie, when he's threatening our characters, Winston and Madeline, he's constantly saying about how he's gonna mangle them so much that they'll be unrecognizable, or they'll need like 10 forensic people to take a look at their body to identify them, so on and so forth. So that's kind of how they really set the tone of the tension of and suspense of Daryl's character and being, how crazy and murder is, if that's a word, he is. So uh, the scuffle happens. They eventually take care of Daryl. They knock him out or she knocks him out with a taser, basically. Like she just keeps on zapping and zapping him until he passes out, which then she needs a little bit of help moving the body. So Winston basically says like, "Hey, if you let me," because he's handcuffed to the plane. He basically says to her, "Hey, if you uncuff me, I can help you." She's a little iffy at first, and then she allows him to be uncuffed. And basically, what the rest of this movie is that there's some double crossing going on. There's some bad cop situation going on. At one point, Winston is telling Daryl, like, "Hey, I'll pay you off. I've been paying people off, even before you for this person that's going to be on trial. There's even this one dude that's been wanting 25,000 monthly, and he's really weird about it." And Madeline catches wind of that, and basically this funnels into that there's somebody in Madeline's department that is also a part of what's going on with this plane. It was a complete setup. And so it's kind of like bad cop situation, but now the good cop and the witness that is supposed to be, chained to the plane now have to work together to survive, not only landing the plane, but survive Daryl as well. So there's a couple of times in the movie where they reach out and they get some help and people guide them to go to where they need to be. There's some, as my dad said during the movie, no way type moments of what happened. There's one part where they're about to like hit the mountain and they barely get away, but they blast through a whole bunch of snow. It's like, yeah, I really don't think I think that's definitely a Hollywood moment for sure. Um, but yeah, aside from maybe 5 minutes in the beginning of this movie and 5 minutes at the end being when they land the plane, everything else is in the plane. So that kind of tells you if you're up for, what I kept thinking to myself is what can be super engaging where we're watching these people in a confined space for basically an hour and a half. And I would say it was, at least decently entertaining. It was good. So, um, there's not much more to really talk about this movie. It's just, like I said, it's one of those double crossing type situations. They deal with Daryl most of the time. There's even one time where he uh, finds a way to, egg on Madeline a little bit, and she beats him up, and he secretly takes the sunglasses she was wearing and breaks the sunglasses so he can like chisel out of his restraint and then rips his hand out of handcuffs. So there's a lot of like crazy things that happen in this movie, but ultimately, um, it's one of the better double crossing movies, in my opinion. They are able to land the plane when the time comes, even though it's a very, very poor landing. But uh, yeah, good stuff. I would recommend it at least for streaming. The only really, like I said, the only things that I really didn't care for this movie were one, there was some weird comedy throughout, and two, just some of the CGI wasn't the greatest. I feel like there was a lot of moments where the filming was great And so it didn't make sense to me that there was like these handful of places that really weren't cleaned up. And so um, my wish is that they would have done better with that and, you know, cleaned it up a little bit, make it an entire solid movie visually from beginning to end, and not try to cut some corners on the budget with it. I can't imagine the budget was very much money. I mean, yeah, you had Mark Wahlberg. I'm sure he was expensive. Um, Topher Grace, probably a decent amount of money. I do not know Michelle Dockery's um, history in Hollywood. I don't know if she's a newer actress or if she's kind of a veteran actress, but I'm sure she got paid decently. And then just if you think about it, the majority of this whole film was in a plane with some green screen around it. So there can't be much budget that was involved. But okay, well, if you enjoyed this type of video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Drops a like if you liked the video, and drops a comment letting us know if you went and saw Flight Risk and what your thoughts were. I was the only one that went and saw it between me and Sarah, and so that's why I'm the only one here. It's not a grotesque thing because if you watched our channel, a lot of times I do videos when movies are more violent because that's really not up Sarah's alley. But this is just one that I went with my dad and my mother-in-law. So, all right. As always, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.